Season 5, Episode 28. Black History Moments is a podcast dedicated to telling the stories of those who have been forgotten or who are lesser known in our history. This month, we have been covering the history of a few HBCUs or historically black colleges and universities. So far, we've covered Florida A&M University, the Lincoln University, and Prairie View A&M University. This week, it officially marks the last week of Black History Month for us, and I wanted to cap the month off with Howard University, aka the Mecca. Originally starting with 5 white students, Howard has come a long way since then. Let's dive into the story of Howard University. Howard has such an interesting origin story, and we will get into why that is. But first, we have to learn about who Howard University was named after. Major General Oliver Otis Howard was a white man originally from the state of Maine. Now, you may recall that the man who was responsible for the founding of Florida A&M University, his name was Thomas Gibbs. He attended a military school named West Point in New York. Well, Oliver Otis Howard also attended West Point, but he graduated from the school a year before Thomas Gibbs was even born. I thought that was an interesting piece of history that 2 men responsible for the founding of 2 different HBCUs attended West Point. Now, Oliver Otis Howard graduated from West Point as the 4th top student in his class in 1854. After he graduated, he went into the military and served 2 years in the Army, but he would soon return to West Point in order to teach mathematics. On April 12, 1861, the Civil War began, and Oliver Howard was commissioned as colonel in the 3rd Maine Infantry. He would go on to serve in many notable battles like the 1st and 2nd Bull Runs and the battle at Gettysburg. When he fought in the Battle of Fair Oaks, he was shot through his elbow and had to have his right arm amputated. However, this did not stop him from serving because he went on to serve in many other battles after this one. While fighting, Oliver Howard found himself to become thoroughly invested in, quote, the welfare of the nearly 4 million enslaved people who had been freed during the war. This concern of his led to him being appointed by President Andrew Johnson to a role that would make him the commissioner of the Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands, otherwise known as the Freedmen's Bureau. Now, that bureau that Oliver oversaw was extremely important for Black people during this time. A little bit about the Bureau from our National Archives says, its mission was to provide relief and help formerly enslaved people become self-sufficient. Bureau functions included issuing rations and clothing, operating hospitals and refugee camps, and supervising labor contracts between planters and freedmen. The Bureau also managed apprenticeship disputes and complaints, assisted benevolent societies in the establishment of schools, helped in legalizing marriages entered into during slavery, and provided transportation to refugees and freed people who were attempting to reunite with their families or relocate to other parts of the country. As Congress extended the life of the Bureau, it added other duties to it, such as assisting Black soldiers and sailors in obtaining back pay, bounty payments, and pensions. So as you can imagine from that little excerpt, the work that was being done by Oliver Howard and those who worked with him at the Bureau was extremely important for the lives of previously enslaved people and also their descendants. But one of those benefits that can still be seen today of Oliver Howard's work was the establishment of schools and training institutes for Black people. So a group of people get together and they come up with this idea to open a school. And originally, the school was going to serve as a seminary to train Black ministers, but was soon expanded to include the training and educating of Black teachers. From Howard's site, quote, the concept of the proposed school as a mere institute did not last long. Other fields of study were considered, and the concept of the school was enlarged to that of a university. The name Howard University was proposed in honor of General Oliver Otis Howard, who was highly regarded as a hero and a humanitarian and someone who played an important role in the institution's conceptualization. On March 2nd, 1867, a charter approved by the 39th United States Congress to incorporate Howard University was signed into law by President Andrew Johnson. 17 men, including General Oliver Howard, were named as trustees in the charter and are considered as the university's founders. The charter specified the following departments: normal and preparatory, collegiate, theological, medicine, law, and agriculture. While clearly the intent of the founders was to uplift African Americans, especially those recently freed from slavery, the university was established on the principle that it would be open to all races and colors, both sexes, and all social classes. So on May 1st, 1867, Howard University opened its doors with 5 white female students who were daughters of 2 of the founders. So there you have it. As a quick recap, Howard University was named in honor of General Oliver Otis Howard, and the school's first students were actually 5 white women. So as time passes, of course, more previously enslaved people and free Black people start coming into the mix at Howard University, and Howard founded the nation's first Black law school. And in 1872, a woman named Charlotte Ray was one of its first graduates. Now, Charlotte Ray was the first woman to graduate from the school and also the first woman admitted to the District of Columbia Bar, which made her the first Black woman to practice law in the United States. Now, for the first 59 years of Howard University's existence, all of the school's presidents were white and ministers, and it seemed to be working, right? Like, they're flourishing with the law school. They have their medicine studies program, their agriculture programs, their theological programs, and the students are going out into the country like a Charlotte and making a difference, right? But as you all know, we always have at least one turning point at every school we have covered thus far. Howard's turning point happened in the early 1920s when the mission seemed to become compromised when their sitting president was a man named J. Stanley Durkee. President Durkee was running the school into the ground, if I'm being completely honest. He discouraged the study of African American history, which is insane to think that this will happen at a school initially founded to uplift Black people. Why would you not want those students to study African American history? But that wasn't all. He also started moving staff around without discussing these moves with the deans of those schools. He would hire and fire as he saw fit and not discuss it with anyone. And the way he was moving started to cause issues with not only faculty at the school, but Black people outside of the school as well. For example, Allen Locke, who was a major player during the Harlem Renaissance, he hadn't even attended Howard University. He actually attended Harvard. But he wrote a letter to W.E.B. Du Bois about what J. Stanley Durkee was doing to the institution. And that's one thing I always find fascinating when researching these stories, because it seems as though back then, an issue impacting Black people anywhere would warrant a response from many others outside of the actual issue. So, did Allen Locke go to Howard? No. Did he still take up the fight to protect the school? Yes. From the school site, quote, "The consensus among the university's community was that the time had come for a Black president. The Board of Trustees hoped that an outsider, someone popular among Bison, yet removed from the university's administrative structure, could bring balance and stability to the situation." And with this, J. Stanley Durkee was forced out, and the first Black president of Howard University was named. His name was Mordecai Wyatt Johnson, and Mordecai was only 36 years old at the time of his appointment to president. And if you're wondering about where Mordecai had gone to school, he had actually attended what we now know as Morehouse in Atlanta for his high school and his college years. As president, quote, "Johnson's vision for the university emphasized the need for Black lawyers and educators. He referred to sociology, economics, social philosophy, history, biology, anthropology, and religion as the necessary intellectual resources for the advancement of Black Americans and the United States as a whole. In keeping with that vision, Johnson strengthened the university's facilities and faculty, seeking to build up the university to compare favorably to any liberal arts university in America. Improving the university's financial status was Johnson's first order of business as president. Since 1879, Congress provided subsidies to the university, but the amount of money provided was neither adequate nor annually guaranteed. Encouraged by Johnson's leadership, Representative Lewis C. Crampton and other lawmakers pushed a law through Congress that provided annual support. In recognition of this monumental 1928 act, the NAACP awarded Johnson with one of its highest honors, the Spring Arm Medal. Under Johnson's 34-year administration, yes, 34 years, congressional appropriations to the university increased to $6 million annually. The number of faculty tripled, faculty salaries doubled, and the quality of each school in the university improved. Notably, Howard University's College of Medicine, one of 2 medical schools in the country that accepted Black students, obtained a $250,000 grant for a new building, plus another $180,000 for equipment. The School of Law went from a night school to the premier training grounds for Black civil rights attorneys and law professors, including future U.S. Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall, who also attended the Lincoln University as well, which we have another episode on that school too if you want to hear a little bit more on that. Also under Johnson's administration, national honor societies such as Phi Beta Kappa were established on Howard University's campus, and enrollment increased exponentially. Now, when it comes to the Howard University mascot, the name came from a combination of factors. Howard says that after the Civil War, a troop of colored soldiers were admired by the Native Americans for their fighting spirit and resolve, and they tabbed them Buffalo after this revered symbol. In addition, head coach Edward Morrison, who had served as a sergeant in the Army, aspired to this symbol. Legend has it that he decided to call the Howard team after the American version, the Bison. So there you have it, the origin of the Bison mascot. Now, one thing I have always personally admired about Howard University students is that they don't play in terms of social injustice or anything in that regard. And I believe that that fight has been embedded in the lifeblood of the school. Quote, during the 1930s, Howard University students engaged in protest demonstrations against segregation and job discrimination by picketing stores in downtown Washington, D.C. In the early 1960s, Howard University students, including Stokely Carmichael, participated in civil rights protests across the racially segregated South. And there are even pictures of Stokely Carmichael at FAMU, on FAMU's campus, talking his talk and walking his walk. In the late 1960s, Howard's fight and protest was within its own campus. From Crystal Wilson, a great author, might I add, she tells the story of this. Howard University had a problem that was bubbling up within its own walls. Quote, the protest was the culmination of months of tension between a portion of the student body and the administration. There were various contributing factors, but all seemed to point to a fundamental question. What was and what should be Howard's identity as a Black university? An institution chartered in 1867 to educate freedmen, Howard had long been renowned for its output of exceptional Black professionals. But as the Black Power movement took hold in the 1960s, many students felt the administration had become, quote, too reluctant to change and also unwilling to, quote, adjust to the time and culture. In order to be a true Black university, the protesters claimed Howard needed to transform the way it embraced and related to the larger Black community. As Mans would reflect for the Eyes on the Prize documentary, quote, The Black issue was that Howard should exist for the benefit of the Black community, and it ought to be involved in economic change and political change, with its purpose not only being to achieve a liberal education and also to become a member of the middle class. It needed to be deeper than that, and that's what Howard University students were feeling. And I believe that's one of the issues we saw at many of the major HBCUs, this idea of assimilation versus acculturation, right? Like, assimilation is when a minority culture adopts the culture of the majority. So in this case, white society, Black people would be assimilating into white society, versus acculturation, which is the blending of cultures while still maintaining your own. We saw the same thing with FAMU's story when, I don't know if you all listened to that episode yet, but when the middle-class Black people in the city thought that it would be better to fold the school into the PWI down the street. Same thing happening here. One of the results of Howard's protest of what was happening at the time was, quote, the formation of the Afro-American Studies Department, which began during the 1968 to 1969 academic year. Its first chairman, Professor Russell Adams, recalled that students emphasized that there ought to be a program whose responsibility was to look at the experiences of persons of color, especially in the Western Hemisphere. The result of this program has been a comprehensive curriculum that specifically looks back, looks around, and looks to the future of the Black experience in America. Now, these changes didn't happen until after students had staged sit-ins in the administration building, and also they had visits from notable figures like Muhammad Ali and Stokely Carmichael. The campus newspaper printed in 1968, quote, if this is not revolution, then what is, end quote. And I just love that. That is so beautifully said. I would also be remiss if I did not mention that out of the 9 Black Greek Letter Organization, or NPHC organizations, 5 of them were founded on the campus of Howard University. Those 5 being Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated, and the organization that I am a member of, Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated. Over the years, Howard has become a premier institution and has been the institution of higher education to many that we know and love over the years. With 14 schools and colleges in more than 130 areas of study, including Afro-American studies, that those students fought to have at the university, public health, theater arts, and more, Howard has come a long way from being that school originally intended to educate Black people after the Civil War, but initially opening with 5 white students. As they say, truth and service has been something they've held to, and I have no doubt that they will continue to do so. That brings us to the end of this episode and also to the end of Black History Month. I hope that you share this with someone that you know, someone that you love, someone that you would want to know the history of a few of our HBCUs. I'm going to take a break next week, but I will be back the week after next for another installment of our HBCU history. I hope that you remember that you too are Black history, and I'll see you in the next one.